Hey guys, so what's been happening in Hobby this week? Well, I thought we'd have a little bit of a discussion on MCP. So I've been playing it for a little bit now and painting up a bunch of the miniatures, and I thought it would be a cool idea for us to go through and have a little chat about it, sort of like a first impressions or like an early impressions of the game, and just go through that. As I said before in one of my previous vlogs, we were going to go through some of these, I guess skirmish games or sub games that exist out there, that you might be playing in addition to something like Age of Sigmar or Warhammer 40k or those sort of, or Infinity, those sort of like bigger games, and having one of these sideline games. And MCP is a really interesting one because it's not really a sideline skirmish game, it's more of a main game, and we're going to go into that in the discussion because there's a lot more to MCP than maybe might meets the eye initially. I think that'll be a fun discussion just to talk about it. And while we do that, I'm going to be painting Captain Marvel here from the starter box. I think she's a really great figure, really nice to paint, like a good pose, everything like that. It's really good. So we're going to be doing a sort of a blue-black kind of color scheme for her bodysuit, and then I think probably some purple-yellow combinations like I've done previously on other miniatures for the cloth and some of the other smaller details, maybe some green in there. I like some good blue-green, so this will keep it in keeping with the rest of my miniatures, that sort of thing. So it should be a really fun one to do. She's a great figure, so that'll be great. But yeah, I think we should get started and let's have a bit of a chat about MCP, eh? So yeah, MCP. Well, look, I mean, we'll start with this. It's a great game. I don't think anyone would deny otherwise. It's a really, really well put together game. And there's a lot of reasons why it's a good game, but the simple fact is it's fun. And that's the first thing that you, I guess, experience going in is, you just realize, oh, this is a really fun game. And you might not even be that interested in the Marvel characters or even necessarily the game structure. It's something weird about the game that overrides some of those things, because for a lot of miniature wargamers, or at least people that I've come into contact with, you either like Marvel stuff and so therefore the game is you sort of attracted to it, or you don't like Marvel stuff and so you never really touch the game. But from a gaming point of view, it is really fun, and if you can get past that sort of initial thing of the minis may or may not being for you, you can actually find a really fun and satisfying game there. So it has this sort of separate section of it, which is separate from the miniatures, let's say. A lot of us tend to attach ourselves to the lore, the imagery, the miniatures themselves as very fundamental to that collection process and the painting and hobby process, and then the gaming on top of that. But for those that look for a good gaming experience, MCP really does offer that. If let's say the hobby side isn't as big for you and it's the gaming side, then it's instantly appealing. And so there's got this, and there's many reasons for this which we're going to go into, but I just want to put that up there straight away, is that the gaming side of this game is great. And now the miniatures are also really cool. They're a slightly larger scale than let's say your standard Games Workshop or tabletop game. I think they're around 40 mil, and so it allows for a lot of detail. They're more true scale, so the anatomy on the figures is more in line with a real person, so you don't have oversized heads and hands and things like that, which is great. It gives you a different aesthetic, a different kind of look for these minis, and they're all sort of unique character models, so it sort of jumps around the sort of the monotony of having to paint troops, right? Each one is a character and interesting, and separate from the next. They all have their own color schemes, etc. So there's this whole sort of appealing side there, which we'll dig into. But yeah, initially the game is fun, and that's really great. So why is this game fun? Well, it has a really great sort of entry point or build up or ramp into this game. So they have a sort of a scaled down version of the rules, and that's what you go into when you start. And as you play, you then add on more of the game's rules and build up into the more complex version of the game. So it has a really good entry point and build up to the bigger game system. And I think that's something that makes MCP really attractive and easy to pick up but hard to master, right? It feels very easy when you're first playing it, but then you realize there's a lot of minutiae, a lot of crunch in the game, and it starts to really open up. And the more you play it, the number of characters that exist in this game, the superheroes and all that, there's a big chunk of characters, a big roster, and one of the things that you'll notice is that any of the characters can ally with any of them. You can make a team of any of them. They do have factions, and they have faction abilities if you have all of the same type or majority in your team of the same type. So let's say X-Men, or what else, like Cabal, or any of the different sorts of Hydra, any of the different sorts of factions that you have currently in the game. Then you'll get these sort of special bonuses with the leader and so on that's leading them, and for the units. But you can ally in anyone that you want. So Mr. Sinister can be with Wolverine, etc. Normally they would be enemies, but in the wider universe of Marvel and comics, often there are a lot of team ups and a lot of unlikely allies that come together in a lot of these comics. So they've tried to incorporate that in the game system, and what it means is you get this much broader kind of synergy of rules on these characters and how they interact with one another, and that's a really interesting thing from a gaming point of view. And I think that's where its real strength is. It has a lot of diversity in terms of the lists that you can run, and then there's the power level of them, right? So you get smaller teams and bigger teams and so on, and each one has different types of units that would work for that. Some of the smaller characters are great in one size but not great in another, so then you want to take them out and put other ones in, and so there's all this minutia there going on, and then we start to see the real complexity of the game. And that's just on the list construction side. Then we move into the gaming side, and there's a whole nother layer on top of that. And so this game has a great way in and a great way to open up to you all of these new ideas, and it starts to become a lot bigger than you might anticipate. And so that's where we get to this sort of, this really isn't a sideline game. It can be played like that. You can play a simple version of the game and play it quickly, but you soon become attached to this system and the way that it plays, and because there's so much there in terms of the list writing, it does really suck you in, and it starts to become your main game. And a lot of the people that I've been playing with, or in my club and the mates that I play with, they're sort of mainlining this game at the moment. They've put aside things like Age of Sigmar onto the back burner, and they're playing MCP as their main game because it has enough in there to do that. And coming into this year, they've done a lot to add in new characters. They've also released all the cards for free, like the updated cards. So they're changing the format and the approach with the way that they distribute the information. So initially, when I first came to this, you had everything in the card packs or in the packs that came with the miniatures, and that was actually very disjointed. It made it very difficult to really visualize the tactics of this game, because if you didn't have the cards, you couldn't actually employ all the different tactics, and those that had them would be able to do more. So the fact that they released it all as a PDF that you could download, so you can actually see the full breadth of the game and all of the different tactical options that are available to you, it allowed you a more full idea of what the game is in your head when you fantasize about it. How we do with Warhammer. That's part of the great fun of Warhammer, is that pre-game fantasia of coming up with the list and how you're going to play it and all the different tactics you're going to employ. Well, you can't do that if you don't know all the things that you can do, right? It'd be like having an army book with only half the rules in there and the other half behind a paywall. It would be very difficult. So, them doing that allows for a much more full experience of the game front up, so the moment you go in. And that's really, really important, because that again makes a much better inroad into the game, which is its strength. They're definitely changing this as they go, as they make this game, to make it more and more accessible and more interesting in terms of that building and playing. So it really is a main game and can be played that way. So then we have on the board, and so the first thing you'll notice is it's slightly smaller than your average tabletop game. It's on a 3 foot by 3 foot board, and the real gaming area is actually a lot smaller than that. I would say that the real gaming area that you're playing on is not much bigger than a Warcry board in terms of the space where the characters are actually fighting over the objectives. It's actually a small area within that 3 foot by 3 foot board. That's where most of the intensity and the battles are happening. So it's an interesting game because it's actually playing on a relatively small area. All the objectives aren't that far away from each other, and it's this constant push and pull of pushing someone off an objective, throwing things at them, trying to disable them, debuff them, buffing your own characters, all these little synergies, and you're basically moving off points in around this board. And so it's a really interesting sort of game mechanic, the structure and the way you actually play. And so these types of abilities like throwing and all of that become really important. The way you displace someone, the way you move, extra moves that you can do on top of the actions you have, etc., all the other superpowers you have in addition to your actions, which allow you to do more, all of those sorts of things become really important. And so it does have quite a lot of depth in terms of how you're going to achieve those points over the course of a game. So there's a lot there for you, and so yeah, you can take it all the way through to a main game, and I think that's really beautiful and that's great. And I think that's really why it's starting to become so popular, not just because of Marvel itself, but because they've really designed something really interesting and quite separate from other tabletop games in the same sort of genre or size. And then we move into, I guess, the hobby side. So from that point of view, as I alluded to before, they're all characters, they're all individuals, which is a great, MCP becomes a really great sort of refresher miniature thing to do, right? So let's say you're building an army for Age of Sigmar or Warhammer 40k, and you're getting tired of that. You can just pull out one of these MCP characters and paint them, and it's like a third or a quarter or even sometimes a half of your team, right? And so you've almost made a new team. And so you paint one, and it's an individual color scheme. They don't have to be the same colors all the way through your models. So there's always variety there, and you're just painting one mini, and that's really nice. It's very, very relaxing. It's refreshing. It's a good thing to have a go at. It's a different scale. All those things sort of take you out of the monotony of, let's say, doing batch painting on large units of, whatever you're painting, right? Imperial Guards, Space Marines, skeletons, goblins, whatever it is that you're painting. It can get a bit monotonous. And so MCP doesn't really have that kind of drag on it, which is another really, interesting thing and feather in its cap, because it does keep things interesting for you. But again, you have to like Marvel miniatures and the scale and the size and everything. Those things have to be in line for you in order for you to enjoy that, right? And otherwise, it's not really going to hit the mark for you. So that's the only, I guess, kind of negative side, is the actual lore and world itself. If Marvel's not your thing, then it's going to be hard to get into this. But if you don't mind it and you give it a go, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by just how it feels to paint one of these minis. They are actually really fun. A little bit fine in places because they are a true scale, but overall they're a pretty fun bunch of models to paint, and I've genuinely enjoyed it, which I didn't think I would, really, to be honest. I didn't think I would enjoy them as much as I have. I've painted maybe about 12 or so of them now, and they've all been really fun. They've all been actually quite enjoyable, which has been really cool. I really like that, and it's goaded me on to want to actually paint some more. So that's a really positive side of I guess of the hobby and how it all works out. And now we'll go on to, I guess, maybe some negatives. I've already alluded to the fact that you have to really like Marvel in order to really enjoy this game, but we'll see if there's any other sort of, I guess, maybe negative things about it that might not want to make you do it, right? And so what have I noticed about those? Well, yes, you've got I guess the Marvel itself, and whether you like that, that's one thing. What's another thing? Those cards and how you have to sort of have them in order to be able to play all the tactics. Now they've kind of corrected that now, so that's great. But early on, that was a little bit of an issue, at least for me, in order to visualize the tactics. So there was a few little things there that were kind of hidden behind a paywall. Basically, you had to, like a Pokemon thing, you had to buy all the boxes to get all of the cards, and I don't really like that format, that sort of business style approach. But they seem to have altered that now and given out the tactics cards as PDFs, which is great. So that removes that paywall bit and allows you to actually do the game, and that's really great, because all it means is you're going to stay longer in the game and you're going to buy more of the minis, so they're going to get the money anyway. So it never made sense to me to put that sort of stuff behind a paywall, because it's just giving you a barrier to entry, and so then you just lose interest and you move away to something else. There's so many different games out there that grabbing your attention that you don't really want to have those kinds of stumbling blocks to get someone to commit, right? So that's one area, I guess. I guess the different scale means it's a different size of terrain you've got to build and buy and so on. They do have a lot of pre-made terrain. If you've got a 3D printer, this makes it so much easier because you can print out a lot of it, and there's a ton of STL files out there for MCP. So on that front, it's not too bad, and you don't need that much terrain, but you do need a lot of small pieces. Throwing things in this game and you know, manipulating the terrain around you is really important, and so you will need little, you know, knickknacks and, like, you know, street signs and all kinds of bits and pieces like that. However, you can just go to your local, you know, Kmart or whatever sort of shopping center you have in your country, and, you know, buy a bunch of toys that are the similar scale, and then use those. You know, that's a great way to populate your MCP board. So there are definitely solutions to it, but I guess the terrain could be a barrier for entry if you didn't want to paint something as big as all that. So that is another thing to consider. So there are a few bits and pieces there which I guess might be a barrier to entry, but overall you don't need many miniatures to get started with this. You're looking at maybe half a dozen, like 6. You know, a 10 figures is a roster, but really to play your first game, you know, 5 to 6 models is usually enough, and you can get started. The starter box has everything you need, but if you're buying them individually, then it'd be only like 5 or 6 models and you'd be ready to go. And they do come with their cards and so on in the box, so that makes it a good thing. Plus those PDF downloads, you should be ready to play some games. So I guess there's not a lot of negatives to this game really as it's developed, like as it stands right now. I don't really notice too much. It's more of an aesthetic thing, and whether you like it or not, I guess, is the only drawback to you deciding on it, I suppose. So yeah, so my thoughts on this game are really that it is fun, it's very enjoyable, and you know, it's easy to get into. It's fun to paint. They're fun to paint, and overall, it's just a fun little game to muck around with. But you know, be warned, this can be a main game, and so, you know, depending on your funds will depend on, I guess, how much you want to involve yourself into this game. But keeping it as a sideline game, I think, is really nice, because it does give you that little refresher thing to sort of put aside your main army and just do one of these figures, and before you know it, you'll have half a dozen of them done, and you know, then you can start playing games with your mates. And you know, that's a nice thing to have in the background, that you've got this sort of complete little game or little warband that you can always pull out and just play this pretty easy game at varying levels of complexity. So you can play the sort of the entry point version of it, or you can play the full game, and that's really nice. And I think that's a great thing to have, and I've been enjoying it, and we'll continue to do some MCP over the year and play a little bit more and paint some more of these figures as they come out, and see how the game evolves and see what else they do with it. You know, Atomic Mass Games is also releasing a Star Wars version of this, so this similar style, scale and gameplay style. I think it's called Shatterpoint for Star Wars, and that's going to have a similar kind of thing where you've got these teams and larger sort of 40mm style figures and that sort of thing. We don't know yet, I think, what the rules are going to be like compared to MCP, but you know, they're definitely moving in a similar direction, I guess. So that'll be really fun to see what happens with Star Wars and how that influences overall or differentiates itself from MCP, and whether they're both unique games or they're both similar, and whether that will mean you play both or you play one. Hard to say, but we'll see. It's coming soon, so we're going to know about that very shortly, and I'll probably cover that as well. A lot of my friends want to do that as well, so we'll have a chance to play it and see whether the miniatures and the game itself is actually fun to do. So yeah, exciting things to come. But now let's have a look and see how I've gone on Captain Marvel, and I'll give you my closing thoughts, and we'll just see how this paint job has come up. I'm sure it's cool. It's in my usual scheme, so it'll be fun to do. And there we go, Captain Marvel all done. Let's take a look. So yeah, she came up really cool. I really like the blue-black that I ended up going with this on the bodysuit. I think that's really cool. It just sets it off nicely against the sort of the blue, purple, yellow that's in the robes and so on. So yeah, really fun. You know, it's not the usual color scheme for Captain Marvel. It's a bit, I guess, more sinister or something like that. But most of the other characters I've got are evil, so it fits in with that group. And as I said during this, you know, you can mix and match your characters and make up teams with anyone. So it doesn't really matter. I thought the little, you know, flash of green in the hair and so on was helping with that, the overall aesthetic. So yeah, pretty fun. So yeah, you know, in terms of first impressions of MCP, yeah, it's a fun game, and it's well worth having a go at if you've got, the spare funds and maybe a friend or two that wants to have a go at it. It can be really, really cool and a good time. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this. As I usually do, I'll leave a nice image of her at the end and the paint list. But I hope you've enjoyed this. Please hit that like button, subscribe button. It really helps me out. And I guess I'll catch you on the next one.